what's really nice? Just falling asleep a little earlier than you usually would. Waking up, just being up for a little while. Smoking this pipe. Got a beer glass right here filled with some nice Halloween-themed limited edition Busch. And I get to do the second installation of the podcast you all know and love. Where to begin? This online article by Fox News, written by a Mr. Greg Ray. Rand Paul warns of assassination peril after Kavanaugh confirmation. I really worry someone is going to be killed. Quote. Following the bitterly partisan, acrimonious confirmation battle over Associate Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky warned in an interview on Tuesday that heated political rhetoric has the potential to turn deadly. I fear there's going to be an assassination, Paul told a Kentucky radio show. I really worry that somebody is going to be killed, and that those who are ratcheting up the conversation, they have to realize they bear some responsibility if this elevates to violence. Paul's comments came the same day former presidential candidate Hillary Clinton declared that Democrats cannot be civil with Republicans any longer. Paul's wife, Kelly, revealed in a Breitbart News interview on Friday that she sleeps with a loaded gun by her bed, and she's updated her home security system and has deadbolts all over her house. Kelly also wrote an op-ed published by CNN in which she called Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey to tone down his rhetoric in June. Booker suggested his supporters get up in the face of Congresspeople. The Kentucky senator reiterated his wife's criticism on Tuesday. When people like Cory Booker say get up in their face, what he doesn't realize is that for every 1,000 persons who want to get up in your face, one of them is going to be unstable enough to commit violence, Paul said. And that's a very pithy statement. I mean, we remember that fiasco at that ballpark with that senator whose name I can't remember, shot at by that fuckhead. I can't remember his name. It's getting so hard to remember names nowadays. I mean, it basically goes to show how low we've come as a Western society, if not Western society in general. Okay, continuing on with the article. Last week, Paul was chased and verbally harassed by anti-Kavanaugh activists at Washington's Reagan International Airport. Washington's Reagan National Airport is what I meant. And last fall, Paul was attacked and beaten in his yard in Kentucky by his neighbor, an episode that a Kentucky Democrat joked about earlier this year. Paul was attending the congressional baseball practice last summer when a gunman opened fire. That was the one I was just talking about, hitting House Majority Whip Steve Scalise of Louisiana in the hip, injuring 2 Capitol Police officers and an aide. The episode was very nearly a massacre, lawmakers said. When I was at the ball field and Steve Scalise was nearly killed, the guy shooting up the ball field and shooting I think 5 or 6 people, he was yelling, "This is for health care," Paul told host Leland Conway on Tuesday. When I was attacked in my yard and had 6 of my ribs broken and pneumonia, lung contusion and all that, there are people that are unstable. We don't want to encourage them. Okay, there's a link between texts here that says Republican senator receives graphic text message of beheading, sees personal information leaked after yes vote on Kavanaugh. It's just eerie, the kind of things, the kind of shit the left comes up with nowadays. The activists, the politicians, it's just fucked up. Especially Cory Booker, but I'll get to him later. Continuing on, the uncorroborated sexual assault accusations against Kavanaugh, Paul said, didn't justify keeping him off the Supreme Court, much less the partisan rancor surrounding his confirmation. Paul, who was initially skeptical about Kavanaugh's constitutional views on privacy, ultimately became one of the 51 senators who supported its confirmation. We don't want to be the standard that anyone can accuse anybody of anything, he continued. That would sort of be the standard they had in Venice in the 15th century when people would put their complaints into the mouth of the lion, and you put your complaint in, and people would lose their head over that. Paul then echoed President Trump's comments at a ceremonial swearing-in for Kavanaugh in the East Room on Monday evening, as well as dramatic remarks by Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins last week. The president apologized to Kavanaugh on behalf of our nation, and before thanking Collins, emphasized that in our country, a man or woman must always be presumed innocent until proven guilty. But I'm just going to be honest right now, that is easier said than done. I mean, recent events have proved that point. You're presumed to be innocent, Paul agreed. I just feel really sorry for Kavanaugh and his wife and his children for having to go through that. Hundreds of protesters have been arrested by Capitol Police in the past 3 weeks, with some briefly staying in jail. Kavanaugh, his family, his accusers, and lawmakers all received death threats. Protests outside the Supreme Court on Tuesday, the first day Kavanaugh publicly sat on the bench for oral arguments, were relatively sparse. On Saturday, when Kavanaugh was formally sworn in, demonstrators outside banged on the Supreme Court's doors and attempted to claw their way inside. My God. And a teacher in Minnesota announced she had resigned this week after asking on Twitter, so who's going to take one for the team and kill Kavanaugh? Supreme Court justices receive protection from the Supreme Court Police and U.S. Marshal Service while in Washington, D.C., although they must ordinarily request protection on domestic or international trips outside that metropolitan area. On Tuesday, President Trump suggested some of the demonstrators in the nation's capital were paid to protest and were angry primarily because they haven't gotten their checks. Some of the anti-Kavanaugh protesters who accosted senators on Capitol Hill have ties to liberal billionaire George Soros. I've said this before. George Soros just shells out money to fuck this shit up. I mean, he's up and about doing shit. Everybody knows it. Okay, the tweet by Trump here. The paid D.C. protesters are now ready to really protest because they haven't gotten their checks. In other words, they in Congress and outside were far too obvious, less professional than anticipated by those paying or not paying the bills. A 27-year-old Democratic congressional intern was arrested last week and accused of posting the personal information of at least one Republican senator during a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on Kavanaugh. The intern, who has since been fired, was denied bail on Tuesday. Also speaking in a radio interview on Tuesday, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky said he was proud of his Republican colleagues for standing up to what he called mob tactics during the Kavanaugh confirmation battle. Excuse me. McConnell also said that he would have no problem appointing a conservative justice in the run to the 2020 presidential election if Associate Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg were to retire from the bench. He distinguished that hypothetical from the situation with failed Obama nominee Merrick Garland in 2016 because at that time different parties controlled the White House and the Senate. There's another link here that says Nancy Pelosi compares Kavanaugh to North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. It will depend largely if the Senate is in Republican hands or Democratic hands, McConnell said, saying it is exceedingly rare for a lame duck president whose party does not control the Senate to nominate a Supreme Court justice. I think they overplayed their hand, McConnell said in a quote. The GOP is currently favored to retain control of the Senate after November's midterm election, buoyed in part by a newly energized base after the Kavanaugh fight. Okay, the link here says, Fox News polls show major GOP boost in key Senate battlegrounds with less than a month before midterms. This has been like a shot of adrenaline to Republican voters who probably were not as interested or energized in an off-year election with the president not on their ballot, McConnell said. I think they overplayed their hand. I think the tactics turned off people and turned on our base. I mean, I respect Rand Paul. I mean, even if I have a different opinion than him at times, I mean, he was right. I mean, the Democratic Party and the activists and their voting base, if not the whole of the political left, are becoming increasingly more and more unhinged by the day. I mean, day in and day out, it's just the same thing. And a little earlier, Evan was going through his Twitter feed, and he watched a video posted by one of the people he follows of Black Lives Matter protesters teaming up with the anti-fags, where they just assault an old man in his car for not stopping when they were blocking the street. I mean, I thought we'd heard the last of those motherfuckers when all that shit with Black Lives Matter and the post-2016 fervor died down, but I mean, I guess I was wrong. I mean, I guess I can. I never claimed to be perfect. I've been wrong about many things, and so has Evan. I mean, Evan admitted to me he was wrong about plenty of things before. And all this unhinged hoopla over Kavanaugh having conservative ideals. I mean, if people from the 1950s could see us now, I mean, they would honestly think they were watching an episode of The Twilight Zone. I mean, I know plenty of people have said Twilight Zone before, and honestly, I feel stupid just mentioning it, but it's just what I feel what it is, you know? All these people accosting Kavanaugh over nothing, and I knew from the get-go that Ford's testimony was bullshit. And I'm not surprised that they're not going to go after her, because they put her up to it. They wanted her up to it if they didn't put her up to it. But I mean, it's whatever tool they can get to undermine what Donald Trump is building. I mean, there's this one guy I've disagreed with before when I had a debate on the border wall, people coming in. He disagreed with Kavanaugh, but it didn't seem to me he had a really solid reason to be against Kavanaugh. I mean, but there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I certainly can't force him to like Kavanaugh, but if you're going to be against somebody, you can at least have the decency to have good reasons for it, you know? But what really steams me the most, is just the hypocrisy that comes from people like Cory Booker, that piece of shit. I mean, I can't stand that motherfucker, Cory Booker. I mean, he made a big fucking tantrum about Donald Trump's quote on shithole countries and how he had to explain to his daughters that the president said that. I mean, personally, he should be telling his daughters they should be grateful they live in a kind of country where these kind of liberties and values are appreciated, instead of actual shithole countries where, like West. I mean, you get the idea. I mean, whether it's throwing gays off balconies or constant militia violence in like African countries and shit. And I mentioned Cory Booker while I was reading the article because I'd found this on Twitter. I found this screenshot by somebody we follow. It was a screenshot of a newspaper article which mentioned Cory Booker. It had to be from some time ago. Okay, here it is right now. It's titled, Cory Booker, So Much for Stealing Second. And he quotes right here next to his photo, I received messages that sex was best achieved through guile and strategy. The article says, telling one's own personal story is often the most powerful way to make a point, or, more importantly, to make people think. When grandiose statements entrenched in politically correct terminology are made, many may listen but few will hear. When I hesitated in writing this column, I realized I was basking in hypocrisy. So instead I chose to write in risk. New Year's Eve 1984, I will never forget. I was 15. As the ball dropped, I leaned over to hug a friend, and she met me instead with an overwhelming kiss. As we fumbled upon the bed, I remember debating my next move as if it were a chess game. With the Top Gun slogan ringing in my head, I slowly reached for her breast. After having my hand pushed away, I reached my mark. Our groping ended soon, and while no relationship ensued, a friendship did. You see, next week in school, she told me that she was drunk that night, and with liquor, you'll get to bed quicker, she said. Thinking about her statement back then, I realized its veracity. Coming to college, I was immersed in the same sort of attitudes. What do you think happened? She invited me back to her room at 3 a.m. I've got to find a way to snatch that snatch. The best thing for that girl would be to be tied down and screwed. That motherfucker. Out of context, 3 statements seem shocking, but in context, they were barely noticed. After 2 years at Stanford, I snapped from one extreme to the other. Once during my sophomore year, in response to a slew of my verbiage, a friend of mine chidingly called me a man-hater. In retrospect, my soliloquy titled, The Oppressive Nature of Male-Dominated Society and Its Violent Manifestations. Rape, anorexia, battered wives may have been a surreptitious attempt to wake up call. I will never be the same. I find myself with no conclusion for this column. A conclusion would speak of a simplicity I do not feel. I can find little clarity in the torment of emotions I now experience, even when allusions to this issue are made. All I have are poignant visions. I see that preceding all the horrors of rape are a host of skewed attitudes. I see my friends seeking to get some or to score. I see my people making power plays. I see myself at 15 trotting around the bases and stealing second. I now see the crowds, no, not the spectators, but the thousands, the millions who are rarely seen or heard. I've seen enough. This was Cory Booker, trying to get some back at Stanford. And he has the audacity to go along with the straw man offense against Kavanaugh. Honestly, you can't take these people seriously anymore. These people are in power, yet you can't take them seriously. And that is just what pisses me off. I mean, this is fucking bullshit. I mean, to sit back and watch this bullshit unfold. Kavanaugh did nothing to deserve this. His wife did nothing to deserve this, and neither did his kids. This is bullshit. I mean, any sane person would agree that this is bullshit. Oh my God, I'm rambling. If you were to ask me what I think the current state of affairs are in this country, I would say it's bullshit. I mean, Brett Kavanaugh being defamed for his political views, Cory Booker's bullshit, and that would bring up another sore topic, which has plagued a few of the people who follow me, but out of respect who I will not name. The false accusations against men. I mean, with the advent of feminism, the strong independent women wanting to become like men, wanting to have it all, but they fail to realize that it just doesn't work that way. They think they can get away with falsely accusing men of rape and ruining their lives by having them locked away for years in prison. I mean, that's just what pisses me off even more. Oh my God. I'm bringing up the message right here from one of my followers. Sorry, I was mistaken. It wasn't a it wasn't a false accusation, but it does plague some of the people I who follow me. I mean, there's still good people out there in the world, and I mean, it doesn't get to me that this sort of thing happens to them. Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't it? I mean, through the videos Evan scrolled through on YouTube about what it was like back in the 1950s when men were men and women were women. When men would go out to work or serve in the military, the women would stay at home, raise the children, keep the house together, manage the finances. I mean, I'm all for letting a woman do whatever she wants, but I mean, within the realm of law and order and no false accusations thrown left and right. But throughout history, it's been proven time and again that men are supposed to be the backbone of civilization, to maintain the order of society, while women are more geared to keeping things running at home, raising the children. And I mean, I remember watching this one video some time ago yesterday, I think. In ancient society, I'm sorry, I'm rambling. My mind's just all over the place. In this day and age, the worlds of men and the worlds of women are just becoming more and more intertwined in ways that they're not meant to be. And the worlds of men were meant to be the backbone of civilization, to contribute to society, to work, to go off to war, to protect against other civilizations that they fight against, while women were in their own world, raising the children, handling to domestic worries and troubles. And it was a whole intergenerational thing. Different generations of women working together to keep things running in the domestic sphere. I mean, I'm not saying it was perfect. I mean, no society has ever been perfect, whether it was the institutions or the people. But that kind of way of life would have kept things going at a sustainable rate. But with the advent of feminism since the 1960s, it's just unraveling that order. I mean, nobody's doing what they should be doing. Men aren't being what they should be, and women aren't being what they should be. And those who suffer the most are the children. I mean, Evan talked to me before, and he genuinely considered being a school teacher. I mean, seeing to the needs of the education of children who would need the genuine education, not the indoctrination of Common Core. And if he were to educate children properly, he would have them be ready for the kind of chaos feminism has brought into the world. And the fruit of that chaos is the suffering of Brett Kavanaugh and the hypocrisy of Cory Booker. Well, that's it for the DrToxic podcast number 2. Please like and subscribe.